The email came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, which was already strange because Marcus Holloway did not send emails after 9. Eli knew this the way you know small facts about people you've spent a decade orbiting, not because anyone told him, but because he'd been in and out of the Holloway house since he was 14, eating cereal at their kitchen island, watching Marcus flip the porch lights off at exactly 9:15 like the house ran on a schedule only he could hear. Subject: a proposal the paying kind. Eli, I hear from Jonah that the shop cut your hours for the summer. I have more house than I know what to do with and a lake place that's been rotting quietly for 3 years since I stopped having the time to care for it properly. I need someone who can frame, who won't cut corners, and who I trust not to steal my tools. You fit 2 out of 3. 16 weeks, live in if you want it, fair wage. Think about it. No pressure either way. M. Eli read it 4 times. He was 24 years old, sitting on the edge of a mattress in an apartment he shared with 2 guys from the parts counter, and he was fairly sure this was the first time in his adult life an adult had used the word trust about him and meant it structurally, like a beam. He should have said yes immediately. He needed the money. His hours at the garage really had been cut, and rent didn't care about that. But he sat with his thumb hovering over the reply button for 11 minutes, because saying yes meant living in Marcus Holloway's lake house for 4 months, and Eli had spent a long time, longer than he liked to admit, even to himself, especially to himself, being very careful about how much space he let himself take up around Marcus. He typed, "I'd love to. When do you need me?" Then he deleted love and wrote like instead, because apparently at 24 he was still doing that. Jonah, when Eli told him, just shrugged over video call, spinning slowly in a desk chair in his dorm-turned summer sublet 3 states away. Dad's been talking about that place like it owes him money. Honestly, I'm relieved someone competent is going. Last time he tried to re-shingle the boathouse roof himself, he fell off a ladder and told Mom's sister it was a controlled descent. That sounds like him. He likes you, you know. Always has. Says you're the only one of my friends who ever offered to help him carry something without being asked twice. Jonah grinned. Easy, no weight in it at all. Go fix his sad little house, Eli. Make some money. Try not to let him talk you into a 5 a.m. fishing trip. He does that to everyone eventually. Eli laughed, and it came out normal, and he hated a little how much effort that took. He had known Jonah since freshman year of high school, when Jonah moved to town mid-semester with a black eye from a skateboard accident and no friends, and a father who showed up to every single conference, every game, every stupid awards night, sitting in the 3rd row with his arms crossed like he was guarding something precious. Eli's own father had been gone by then. Not dead, just gone, the kind of gone that leaves a shape in a house rather than an absence. And there had been something about watching Marcus Holloway simply show up, over and over, for a kid who wasn't even always grateful for it, that had rearranged something in 14-year-old Eli permanently. He'd never told anyone that. There was no clean way to say your dad taught me what love was supposed to look like to your best friend without it sounding like something else. And for a long time it hadn't been something else. For a long time it really had just been that. It had stopped being just that somewhere around Eli's sophomore year of college, and he had never once let it show, and he intended to keep it that way for the rest of his natural life, if that's what it took. The lake house sat at the end of a gravel road so overgrown that Eli's truck scraped branches the whole final quarter mile, and when the trees opened up, the house was worse than he'd pictured and more beautiful than he'd expected, both at once. Cedar shake, siding gone silver gray with weather. A porch that sagged on the north and like it was leaning in to hear a secret. A dock reaching out into water, so still it looked painted on. Marcus was on the porch steps when Eli's truck rolled up, wearing an old flannel with the sleeves shoved to his elbows, and he stood as Eli parked, and for one unguarded second before either of them said anything, Eli let himself just look. Marcus Holloway had the kind of face that had probably been handsome in an uncomplicated way at 25 and had become something much more interesting at 46. Weathered at the eyes, gray threading and dark hair at the temples, a stillness to him that Eli had always found more magnetic than he had any right to. He'd lost his wife 9 years ago, a car accident on a rainy November night that Eli only knew about because Jonah had told him once, quietly, like handing over something fragile. Marcus didn't talk about it. Marcus, Eli had come to understand over a decade of proximity, mostly didn't talk about anything that cost him something to say. He built things instead. He showed up instead. Words were not his native language. Hammers were. "You made good time," Marcus said, coming down the steps. "Didn't want to be late on day one and give you an excuse to fire me. I don't fire people for being on time." A small smile, there and gone. "I fire people for using the wrong nails on cedar siding. Please, God, tell me you know the difference. Stainless or hot-dipped galvanized. I'm not an animal, Marcus." Something eased in Marcus's shoulders, a real laugh, short and low, and Eli felt it land somewhere under his ribs the way it always did, that specific warm ache of making this particular man laugh. 16 weeks, Eli thought, hauling his duffel out of the truck bed. You can survive 16 weeks of this. You've survived 10 years. He was aware, even as he thought it, that this was not entirely true. The guest room Marcus gave him had a window that looked straight out over the water, and a quilt on the bed that Eli recognized, Marcus's late wife, and had made it, a slow, careful patchwork of blues, and it had lived on the guest bed in the main house for as long as Eli had known the family. Marcus caught him looking at it that first night, setting a stack of towels on the dresser. "You can put it away if it's strange," Marcus said. "I just didn't think to buy a new one. Never had a reason before now." "I like it," Eli said honestly. "It's a good quilt." Marcus looked at him a beat too long, like he was deciding whether to say something else, and then didn't, and left Eli alone with the sound of water against the dock and 16 weeks stretching out ahead of him like a held breath. They fell into a rhythm faster than Eli expected. Up at 6, coffee on the porch while the lake steamed under early light, then hours of real work, tearing out rotted joists under the boathouse, rehanging the porch on new posts, stripping 60 years of bad paint-off window frames that turned out, underneath it all, to be honest good wood. Marcus worked harder than any man his age Eli had ever met, and he worked well, not flashy, not fast, but precise, the kind of careful that comes from a person who has decided that doing a thing right is a form of respect for the thing itself. Eli found himself watching the economy of his movements more than was strictly necessary for a co-worker relationship. The way Marcus set a level and actually trusted it instead of eyeballing. The way he'd go quiet for a full hour and then say something dry and unexpectedly funny that would catch Eli completely off guard. "You're better at this than you let on," Marcus said one afternoon, watching Eli square up a stud wall with an efficiency that clearly surprised him. "My uncle was a framer. Before he moved to Arizona and stopped answering phone calls, he taught me the basics." Eli shrugged, sighting down the wall. "Guess it stuck." "A lot stuck with you," Marcus said, and there was something underneath it Eli couldn't quite name. Not quite a compliment, something more like an observation Marcus had been making for years and was only now saying out loud. "You were 14 when I met you, and you already knew how to fix a running toilet." I remember thinking, this kid's had to grow up around some absence. Eli's hands stilled on the level. "You noticed that?" "I notice a lot of things I don't say." It should have been an uncomfortable moment. Instead, the two of them just stood there in the framed-out skeleton of the boathouse, afternoon light coming gold through the gaps in the studs, and something passed between them that Eli didn't have a name for yet, except that it felt like being seen, all the way down, by someone who'd apparently been paying that kind of attention for 10 years without ever once making it into something that would have scared a 14-year-old off. "Thank you," Eli said quietly, "for showing up. Back then. To everything. You didn't have to, and you always did." Marcus's jaw worked once. "You were a good kid who needed someone in the stands. Cost me nothing to be that." "It cost you something," Eli said. "Showing up always costs something. That's what makes it mean anything." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Long enough that Eli felt his pulse pick up in a way that had nothing to do with the July heat. And then he picked his hammer back up, and the moment folded itself away, but it didn't disappear. Eli could feel it sitting there between them for the rest of the day, a held note that hadn't resolved. The heat broke in late July with a storm that rolled in off the water so fast that Eli was still nailing down a tarp over the exposed boathouse frame when the first real gust nearly took him off the ladder. Eli, get down. Now." Marcus's voice cut through the wind, sharper than Eli had ever heard it. And then Marcus was at the base of the ladder with both hands braced on the rails like he could hold the whole structure still by will alone. Eli got down. The rain hit in a wall the second his boots touched ground, and they ran for the porch together, laughing, breathless, soaked through in under a minute, the kind of laughing that comes from adrenaline more than humor. Marcus's hand landed on Eli's shoulder as they came up the steps, steadying, and it stayed there a beat longer than a storm required. Inside, the power flickered and held. Marcus toweled off his hair with the unself-consciousness of a man alone in his own house for 9 years, and Eli tried very hard not to watch the line of his throat. The gray at his temples darkened with rain, and failed. "You scared me," Marcus said, quieter now, the porch light throwing long shadows across the kitchen. "Up on that ladder. In that wind. I've been on worse ladders." "That's not." Marcus stopped himself, ran a hand through wet hair, started again with visible effort. "That's not really the point I was making." The kitchen was very quiet except for rain on the roof. "Marcus." Eli's voice came out lower than he meant it to. "What point were you making?" For a long moment Marcus didn't answer, and Eli watched something move behind his eyes. A door he'd kept shut for a long time, testing whether it still opened. "I've spent 9 years being careful," Marcus said finally, slow, like each word cost something to hand over. "Careful not to need anything from anyone. It was easier. Safer. And then you showed up on my porch 3 weeks ago, and I have spent every single day since then failing at being careful. And I don't. Eli, I don't entirely know what to do with that, and I know exactly how it sounds. Given who you are to Jonah, given the years between us, given every reasonable objection a sane man would raise. I've had 10 years of feelings about you I never let myself look at directly," Eli said, and once it was out he couldn't have called it back if he tried. 10 years, Marcus. I told myself it was gratitude. I told myself it was just admiration. I got very good at lying to myself about it. The rain kept falling. Neither of them moved for what felt like a long time, and was probably 4 seconds. "I need to be honest with you about something first," Marcus said, and his voice had gone rough. "Before anything else happens here. I need you to know I see the difference between you at 14 and you now. I've never once let myself think of you as anything but Jonah's friend, a kid I was glad to help, until this summer. Until you were a grown man standing in my kitchen who I couldn't stop looking at. That took me completely by surprise, and it scared me, and I want you to know I'd never have said a word if I thought there was anything but a grown man standing in front of me making his own choices." "I'm 24, Eli said. "I've been making my own choices for a while now. This is one of them." Marcus closed the distance between them slowly, like he was giving Eli every chance in the world to step back, and Eli didn't take a single one of them. The kiss, when it came, was careful in exactly the way Marcus did everything. Unhurried, deliberate, like he was handling something he intended to keep whole. Eli's hand found the front of his still damp shirt and held on, and somewhere outside the storm kept breaking over the lake, and inside the kitchen something that had been building quietly for 10 years finally found its shape. They didn't talk about Jonah that night, or the next morning, which in retrospect was a mistake, because the thing about avoided conversations is that they don't stay avoided. It was 3 weeks later, the boathouse roof nearly finished, the two of them settled into something that felt dangerously, wonderfully like a life. Mornings on the porch, evenings on the dock, Marcus's hand finding the small of Eli's back like it belonged there. When Jonah called to say he was coming up for the long weekend, Eli felt the ground tilt slightly under him. "We have to tell him," he said, watching Marcus's face carefully in the porch light. "Not right when he walks in, but this weekend. He's going to see it anyway. Marcus, we're not exactly subtle, and I won't do that to him. Have him figure it out on his own, or worse, walking on something." Marcus was quiet a long moment, working a groove into the porch railing with his thumbnail. "I'm afraid of what he'll think of me," he admitted finally. That this looks like something ugly. Older man, family friend, a kid I watched grow up. I'm not a kid, and you know that, and so does he," Eli said. "But I understand the fear. I've had that fear for 10 years. That's exactly why we have to be the ones to tell him the truth, plainly, before his imagination does it for us." Marcus nodded slowly and reached over and laced their fingers together on the porch rail, and for a moment neither of them said anything else, because there wasn't anything else that needed saying. They would face it together. That, Eli thought, might be the whole definition of what he'd been missing his entire life. Someone willing to face the hard conversation with you instead of leaving you to have it alone. Jonah arrived Friday evening with a case of beer and no idea, and it took exactly until Saturday afternoon, when he walked out onto the dock and found his father's hand resting on Eli's knee in a way that was not remotely ambiguous, for the world to tilt for someone else too. Nobody said anything for a full 10 seconds. The lake lapped gently against the dock pilings like it hadn't noticed anything was happening at all. "Okay," Jonah said finally, sitting down heavily on the dock, running both hands over his face. "Okay, give me a second. I need a second. Take all the time you need," Marcus said, and his voice had gone careful in the way Eli recognized now as Marcus bracing for something to hurt. How long has this?" "Weeks," Eli said honestly. "It's been weeks. And Jonah, I need you to know I never once, in 10 years of knowing you, thought about your dad like this until this summer. I promise you that. This isn't something I brought into your house. It grew here, on its own, this summer, and it caught both of us off guard." Jonah was quiet, staring out at the water, and Eli's chest ached with how much he needed this specific person's blessing, more than almost anything else in his life. "You're both idiots," Jonah said finally, and there was a wet edge to his voice that he was clearly fighting. "You've both been idiots for years. Dad, you've talked about this kid nonstop since I was 15. Eli, you used to find any excuse to be at our house that had nothing to do with me. I'm not," he laughed shaky. "I'm not mad. I'm just annoyed it took a lake house and a thunderstorm for you two to catch up to what everyone else already saw. You're not upset?" Marcus asked, and Eli heard, underneath it, 9 years of a man who'd been so careful not to need anything, finally letting himself hope for something. "I'm upset it's weird, a little. Give me some time to stop picturing you two holding hands. That's going to take genuine therapy," Jonas said, wiping his eyes and laughing at himself for it. "But upset that my dad found someone who actually makes him happy, someone I already love like family? No, Dad." He looked at Marcus, and something passed between father and son that had nothing to do with Eli at all. 10 years of grief finally allowed to loosen its grip. "You've been alone a long time. I wanted this for you. I just never thought it'd be him." "Neither did I," Marcus said quietly, looking at Eli like he was something he still couldn't quite believe he'd been allowed to keep. "Neither did I, for the longest time." The boathouse got finished in the second week of August, new cedar shakes catching the late summer light, the roofline true and square and built to outlast all three of them. Eli stood back to look at it the way you look at anything you've made with your hands, with a particular kind of pride that has nothing to do with anyone else's opinion of it. Marcus came up behind him on the dock, close enough that their shoulders touched, and looked at the boathouse too. 16 weeks, Marcus said. "That's what I offered you. We're at week 13. Counting down the days until you can get rid of me? Counting the days until the contract runs out, and I have to find a real reason to ask you to stay." Marcus's voice was steady, but Eli felt his hand find Eli's on the dock railing, felt the weight of the question underneath the words. "Which I intend to do, if you'll let me." Eli looked out at the water, gold dark in the last of the light, at the boathouse they'd built together plank by plank, at 10 years finally arriving somewhere honest. "I was going to need a place to live come September anyway," Eli said, and felt Marcus's laugh land warm against his shoulder before either of them said anything else. The lake went quiet and still around them, holding the moment the way it seemed to hold everything that summer had built, carefully and for good.
तेरी अखियां दे होके रह गया, तेरे दिल दे होके रह गया, दिल दे होके रह गया, तेरी अखियां दे होके रह गया, तेरे दिल दे होके रह गया, दिल दे होके रह गया, दिल दे होके रह गया, दिल दे होके रह गया। तेरी चढ़दी जवानी है, तेरी चढ़दी जवानी है, पतला है लक तेरा, उतों अख मस्तानी है। तेरी अखियां, तेरी अखियां, तेरी अखियां दे होके रह गया, तेरे दिल दे होके रह गया, दिल दे होके रह गया, दिल दे होके रह गया, दिल दे होके रह गया। ਸ਼ੀਸ਼ੇ ਦਾ ਟੁੱਟਿਆ ਏ, ਕੱਚ ਸ਼ੀਸ਼ੇ ਦਾ ਟੁੱਟਿਆ ਏ, ਸ਼ੀਲੀ ਅੱਖ ਤੇਰੀ ਜਿਸ ਦਿਲ ਮੇਰਾ ਲੁੱਟਿਆ ਏ। ਤੇਰੀ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਤੇਰੀ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਤੇਰੀ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ, ਤੇਰੇ ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ, ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ, ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ, ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ। ਸੀਮਟ ਦੇ ਪਰ ਤੋੜੇ, ਸੀਮਟ ਦੇ ਪਰ ਤੋੜੇ, ਮੁੰਡੇ ਤੇਰੀ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਆਸ਼ਿਕ ਕਰ ਛੋੜੇ। ਤੇਰੀ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਤੇਰੀ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਤੇਰੀ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ, ਤੇਰੇ ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ, ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ, ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ, ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ। ਕੋਈ ਸਾਵੀ ਵੰਗ ਮਾਇਆ, ਕੋਈ ਸਾਵੀ ਵੰਗ ਮਾਇਆ, ਸੋਹਣੀਆਂ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਕੀਤਾ ਮਸਤ ਮਲੰਗ ਮਾਇਆ। ਤੇਰੀ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਤੇਰੀ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਤੇਰੀ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ, ਤੇਰੇ ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ, ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ, ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ, ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ। ਤੂੰ ਦਿਲਾਇਆ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨਾ ਏ, ਤੂੰ ਦਿਲਾਇਆ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨਾ ਏ, ਸੋਹਣੀਆਂ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਦਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਦੀਵਾਨਾ ਏ। ਤੇਰੀ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਤੇਰੀ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਤੇਰੀ ਅੱਖੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ ਆਂ, ਤੇਰੇ ਦਿਲ